You could say I am slightly obsessed with my good friend, Vincent. And I have to say, I thought I knew the guy, but apparently I didn't. I mean, I've seen hundreds of his paintings, I've read many of his letters, listened to dozens of podcasts about the man.
He goes home, I'm not quite sure of the time frame, but chops away at the lobe of his ear, I think it was, most, which anyone who's ever had a cut on the ear knows there.
And I'm pretty proud to call myself an inhabitant of a city where Van Gogh used to live, right there, and study, right there. Because this is the Royal Academy of Arts in Antwerp, the place where Van Gogh used to study, albeit just for a couple of months, because he left Antwerp pretty soon. But I don't care, I live in a city where Van Gogh used to live. How many people can say that? Yeah, I know. Anyway, despite the fact that Van Gogh means so much to me, he still managed to surprise me. More about that in a minute, but first, a Van Gogh crash course. Okay, so Van Gogh's body of work is simply breathtaking, and it's filled with life and color and movement and torment, and it's huge. He created over 900 paintings and many more sketches and drawings, and you would think this took him ages, but no, he only painted for 10 years of his life, which is nothing. And in those 10 years, his style went from this and this to this and this, which is an incredible evolution to go through in such a short time. And he was ahead of his time, way ahead. People didn't like his work, they mocked him, they didn't take him seriously. But Van Gogh persisted. And yes, Van Gogh had mental problems, fits of hysteria. He might have had epilepsy or schizophrenia, we don't really know for sure. But don't you dare reduce him to the cliché of the tormented genius. Yes, he was tormented, yes, he was a genius, but his art was not a direct result of this torment. In fact, Van Gogh often didn't even paint for weeks on end because he was just too exhausted. No, he only painted when he was lucid, and when he did, it offered him distraction and peace of mind. Until, of course, he died. Van Gogh is a fascinating artist, and just when I thought I knew the guy, he threw me another curveball, because recently I discovered a story I did not know before. While I was reading this collection of letters, I started noticing references to the postman, the postman, the postman, the postman. Which postman? This postman, of course. I knew this guy, I loved his portraits, but I never bothered to check who this man was because I was just too obsessed with Van Gogh and much less with the people he painted. I should have known better. Because here's the thing, in less than a year time, Van Gogh painted 6 portraits of the postman. But at a certain point during that year, the look of these portraits changed. So you could ask yourself, what happened along the way? Well, quite a lot. So let's have a closer look at these portraits and a handful of other paintings because they reveal the wonderful story of Vincent and the postman Joseph Roulin. And this is the very first portrait that Van Gogh painted of him in the summer of 1888 when Vincent lived in Arles. He arrived in Arles 6 months earlier in cold winter, and his time there would prove to become very turbulent. But not yet, because in the months after he arrives, Van Gogh is incredibly productive. He immediately starts painting local landscapes and later in spring also local landmarks and beautiful light still lives and, very important in this story, portraits of locals. Because Van Gogh loves to do portraits of locals, and one of the first locals he meets in Arles is our postman Joseph Roulin. Roulin and his family live close to the yellow house where Vincent stays, and they probably met in the café around the corner, Café de la Gare, which isn't surprising because Vincent and Joseph both like to drink. So they meet and Roulin agrees to model for a drawing and a painting, because Vincent is always looking for people to paint. And Roulin is an obvious choice. I mean, he's this impressive, almost 2 meters tall man, a super proud and strong postal worker that wears his uniform day in, day out. with a face that begs to be painted. In his letters, Van Gogh mentions that Roulin was glowing with satisfaction, with reason, because his wife had just given birth. However, despite his obvious pride, Roulin's pose does seem slightly uncomfortable, with one arm kind of awkwardly resting on the table. In fact, Van Gogh wasn't really happy with Roulin's modeling. He felt he was a little bit too stiff while posing. So he gives it a second try, and in a single sitting he renders this drawing and painting. And this time Van Gogh was happy with the result. He offered to pay Roulin, but he didn't accept the money. But Vincent didn't get away for free, because he did pay for Roulin's food and drinks during the sitting, and Van Gogh says that the chap not accepting money was more expensive eating and drinking. And even though this seems like a trivial anecdote, I do think it's interesting, because Vincent calls Roulin le bonhomme, or the chap, which shows that they didn't really know each other just yet. But still, after creating these very first few portraits in the summer of 1888, Roulin agrees that Vincent would also create a portrait of his newborn baby, which shows how much he believes in his abilities. He trusts him, and over the next few months this trust will grow to wonderful heights. Because by the end of 1888, Van Gogh hasn't just painted Roulin's newborn daughter, he has painted his entire family. There's his wife Augustine, their children Armand, Camille and the newborn baby Marcel, and of course Roulin himself. In total, Van Gogh created more than 20 portraits of the Roulin family members, and almost all of these portraits have these vibrant backgrounds in green, yellow or red. But the backdrop changes in the remarkable La Berceuse, or the lullaby. Because it's the very first time that Vincent uses this exuberant flowery background, and it won't be the last. The painting shows Roulin's wife, Augustine, rocking her newborn baby's cradle by gently pulling the string in her hands. And Van Gogh mentioned that through this portrait he wanted to sing a lullaby with color. And there is quite some color in this portrait, lots of deep greens obviously, but also a garish wallpaper with pink dahlias that have long thin stalks and little leaves against a background dotted with orange and marine. Vincent said that with this painting he wanted to offer warmth and comfort to the people that need it. But maybe painting this also provided comfort to Vincent himself. Motherly comfort, the kind of comfort he didn't get much from his own mother, because throughout his life their relationship was pretty turbulent. Whatever his intentions, fact is that very soon Vincent will need the comfort, because while he's in the middle of painting the first version of La Berceuse, he suffers from his worst mental breakdown to date. On the evening of the 23rd of December of 1888, Van Gogh has a heated fight with Paul Gauguin, the artist that is living with him in the Yellow House. I'm not gonna go into the details of their turbulent relationship. What matters here is that Vincent, in his rage, cuts off his ear, offers it to a girl in a local brothel, and ends up alone. Because the townspeople obviously don't like his mad behavior, and most importantly, Gauguin, who is very important to Van Gogh, leaves. So Vincent gets isolated. He's in bad shape, obviously, and he needs help. And who provides that help? Who supports him unconditionally? You've guessed it, Joseph Roulin. In the aftermath of his psychotic episode, Roulin takes really good care of Van Gogh. He makes sure Vincent is committed to a psychiatric hospital, he watches over him during his stay there, He takes care of Vincent's yellow house and even pays his rent. He also writes to Van Gogh's family to reassure them, and on the day that Vincent leaves the hospital, Roulin stays with him the entire day. Roulin offers constant comfort to the recovering Van Gogh. No need to say that in those very first few weeks of 1889, Joseph and Vincent grow very close. In Vincent's letters to his brother Theo, he doesn't call Roulin the postman or the chap anymore. No, now it is l'ami Roulin, my friend Roulin. Van Gogh describes Roulin as having a tenderness for him as an old soldier might have for a younger one. He says about this tenderness, and I love this quote, that it does one good when it comes from a man who is neither embittered, nor sad, nor perfect, nor happy, nor always irreproachably just, but such a good soul, and so wise, and so full of feeling, and so trustful. Now that's something, isn't it? Vincent loves this man. But then Roulin has to leave. He gets offered a better paying job as a postman in Marseille, and he takes it because he needs the money to feed his family, so he gets separated from his family and from Vincent. But still Van Gogh paints portraits of his family and of Roulin. In January he creates 4 more versions of La Berceuse, and in April 1889 he creates this set of 3 magnificent paintings, probably painted from memory because Roulin is away and he couldn't sit for him. They are without a doubt among my personal favorite works by Van Gogh, especially now that I know of this beautiful friendship. But what's important here is that they're different from the first portraits. It's the same man that Vincent painted the year before, but something obviously changed. Because this time Roulin sits in front of these bold backdrops of swirling flowers and intense colors that are a continuation of his backgrounds in La Berceuse. I love it, but the backdrop is much more than mere decoration, because it also reflects Vincent's vision on what he calls the modern portrait, a concept that he was really excited about. Because according to Van Gogh, a portrait should render a person's character, not by imitating their appearance, but by using bold lines and vibrant colors that express your feelings towards the person you are portraying. So I think we can safely say that the beautiful color combinations and the cascading beard and the many flowers in these portraits are visual proof of Van Gogh's fond feelings for Roulin. Feelings he didn't yet have the summer before, and I just love that you can see this evolution, this blossoming friendship in those later portraits. If La Berceuse was about motherly comfort, then these portraits I feel are about fatherly comfort, or brotherly comfort, so you will. Because maybe, just like he found comfort in painting a mother rocking her baby, Van Gogh is also comforted by painting Roulin while he is miles away in Marseille. Luckily, once in a while Roulin comes over to Arles to visit his family, and when he does, he always makes sure to check in on his friend Vincent. And he also writes letters to Van Gogh, in which he keeps praising his work and tells him, "Continuez vos tableaux." Continue painting. Roulin also tells Vincent that his paintings help ease his family's separation from him, because every evening and morning the little baby Marcel sees her father's face, because one of his early portraits is hanging over her cradle. Vincent's paintings are again offering comfort to those that need it. Van Gogh's time in Arles was incredibly turbulent and lonely. His beloved brother and family were far away in Holland, Gauguin left him, and the townspeople called him Le Fou Roux, the crazy redhead. He was weird, he smelled, he got drunk, people didn't like him, they didn't trust him. Yet one local always kept his arms wide open. Roulin helped Vincent, he drank with him, he encouraged him, and just like his brother Theo, he believed in his abilities when very few people did. Thanks to Roulin's care and encouragement, Vincent got through a very rough patch of his life and was able to continue to create masterpiece after masterpiece after masterpiece until, in July of 1890, Van Gogh shoots himself and passes away in Auvers-sur-Oise, leaving behind an incredible body of work, among which a handful of colorful portraits that radiate with friendship and love for the proud postman Joseph Roulin.